Disclaimer, this is not being made, it is not a mod, it is simply a concept. Hello again, and welcome to another region concept video. This time, Neuron Complex. If you aren't aware, my region concepts are community projects hosted by me over on my Discord server, link in the description. Everything that happened here was started there. We've done two other region concepts, both the Tower and the Glacier, and this is the third. This project took place over the month of September and involved several artists making fauna and flora concepts, as well as art for their concepts, music, and maps. This was all done with the express purpose of constructing a region or group of regions, arguably depending on the size, that was defined through a prompt. There were a lot more submissions this time, but I narrowed it down to about 20 winners, which were decided about halfway through and were fleshed out after that. This video highlights the final region, as well as all of its denizens, and the lore and story of the region, which was made by me. I'm very excited for how this all turned out, so why don't we get started by reading off the prompt that I gave it the first bit. Of course, edited down to reduce spoilers like it usually is, but I mean, you get it. The radio silence is sent you here. The local group was concerned about his silence, and made you for this purpose. Taking the role of a special slug cat named the Infiltrator, you are designed for this, to enter the can of Twisting Roads, an iterator that has recently gone completely silent. When you get there, though, you may realize that this may be a bigger challenge than you had presumed. The halls are completely overrun. The machinery has turned hostile. The genetic control keeping them in check as working cogs has loosened, and they've begun to rapidly mutate into more traditional organisms. You must navigate through this hostile ecosystem at the threat of your own safety, all to climb the General Systems bus and discover what occurred to the iterator at the heart of this place. But looking closer reveals odd modifications and expansions around the area that your implanted knowledge tells you is abnormal. Perhaps there may be more to learn about this region than the fate that befell its formerly sole inhabitant. Barring a few spoilers, this was the prompt given to my Discord at the start of the region project. So, before we do properly get started, let's take a look at that slug cat, the Infiltrator. The Infiltrator is a purple slug cat designed by one of the iterators in Twisting Road's local group. It is a purple slug cat filled with cybernetic implants that enhance and grant abilities required to navigate the treacherous unknown. Durable metal respirators and enhanced support frames are the main structural enhancements, but there's also the additional ability granted by the Infiltrator's creators, that being the Mandatory Cooperation module. Passively, the Infiltrator will emit a beam of bluish light. By default, this beam will face in the direction the Infiltrator is looking, but can also be controlled by the mouse. This beam showcases jump trajectory when preparing a leap, and turns red when it nears predators. This is far from the main point of this beam, though, as with the mouse, you can hover this beam over a creature within relatively close proximity and within line of sight, and initiate a takeover process, essentially allowing the Infiltrator to control creatures in a very similar way to the yet-to-be-added Safari mode. This ability should help the Infiltrator in his stay, though it does take food pips to activate, more food pips being required to control larger creatures. Additionally, the focus required to control a creature is quite immense, and requires the Infiltrator to stay quite still while doing so. All of these enhancements may increase the Infiltrator's speed, strength, and durability, but they also make it require significantly more food. This translates into gameplay as increased food requirements to hibernate, and barely any spare food being left after doing so. Anyways, now that we have our intrepid hero properly lined out, let's see where it first arrives after its journey. The Infiltrator has spent quite a while moving from place to place, but it's finally here. The Silent Exterior. Similar to the exterior of most iterator cans, the Silent Exterior is covered in old modules, but dissimilar to those other cans, this exterior is, as you could guess, completely silent. Very few of the modules still work, and the few that still show signs of functionality are also exhibiting some strange issues. Steam vents dribble unknown colored fluids, overseer hubs lie empty or sealed shut, entrances and ventilation shafts are sealed by strange fibers and fleshy lumps. There must be some way in. This area contains several challenges, but beyond the odd platforming involving loose wires and ropes dangling from the underhang, there are of course also the creatures that remain here. though far from as many as you'd expect there to be. The first creature in the silent exterior, and the first creature that we're going to talk about in this video, are the dead scraps. Laying quietly on the platforms around the area, the dead scraps are unidentifiable corpses that litter the exterior and interior of twisting roads. Despite their slightly sour taste, they are quite nutritious, as they're usually fresh. Their bodies appear warped, as if they've been mutated, and they very rarely have any apparent injuries at all. Where did they come from, and what killed them? Next up, the scatter mantis. As the infiltrator scours the area, it may come across something that appears like an orangish spotlight, but as it moves and reveals what it's connected to, curiosity may turn to fear. The scatter mantis is a mostly mechanical security drone. Their purpose is to clean out the exterior from any errant intruders, though it seems most of their prey have been escapees. They climb up the walls with magnetic metal legs that double as slicing appendages for butchering their victims, though their primary method of locomotion is not its legs, but rather in the verticality-heavy exterior, it would be their long tail that functions similar to a grappling hook, keeping them rooted while they go in for the assault, or simply using it to root themselves while they rest. Their primary method of detection is that aforementioned giant orange spotlight, which is attached to their heads, though this also serves as their primary weakness. While most of the body is immune to projectiles other than stunts from rocks or explosives, the light will crack and shatter when it is hit with a spear, blinding the mantis and causing it to flail around. This usually ends in it falling to its death, though this can also be achieved by spearing its tail, causing it to sever and usually allowing the previously rooted scatter mantis to fall down. Though for the most part, attempting to eliminate a scatter mantis is a surefire way to get sliced to ribbons, so it might end up just being better to avoid the orange spotlight. Next up, the Allfather. Throughout the infiltrator's stay in the exterior, it will often see overseers staring down at it as it moves. However, it has unknowingly stumbled past a warning. As more and more overseers begin to appear, it signals the presence of the Allfather. The Allfather is a gargantuan, bloated overseer, often seen carrying smaller overseers on its back. Its tendrils are prehensile and thick, capable of grabbing the infiltrator if it's within reach. The Allfather is also capable of many things a regular overseer is, including but not limited to popping out almost anywhere. Its arrival is marked by sudden tremors and the infiltrator's detector flashing aggressively. The primary attacking method of the Allfather is its ability to grab and move the infiltrator. It will use this to either drop it off precarious ledges or to slam it against walls and floors. This can be countered with a solidly aimed spear, though the reaction time of the Allfather is quite good, and you will likely not be able to hit it unless it is preparing for or in the middle of an attack. Throughout the infiltrator's stay in the region, the Allfather will slowly become more and more persistent, setting off alarms to draw creatures to the infiltrator's position, or using the very internal systems against the infiltrator. In the meantime, the Allfather can also be seen collecting dead overseers or hunting down the creatures that killed those overseers to begin with. It seems to act as a leader for the overseers, and even seems capable of limited independence, as it can also be seen to have goals outside of its prime directives. At least it looks that way. As the infiltrator moves through the exterior, it might find one of two entrances, one closer to the north and the other closer to the south. If the infiltrator enters through the southernmost entrance, it will be met with what its implanted knowledge should define as the transformer arrays. It inspects the walls. The static shocks it receives tells it that the arrays are still functional, or at the very least are still charged. This will be a dangerous trick, and the infiltrator enters the unstable transformer arrays. The first denizen of which is the coil grass. Most of the coils are inactive, granting relatively safe passage, but even among those inactive coils, coil grass can still be seen. The coil grass is the biological innards of the electric coils throughout the unstable arrays, which have mutated and seeped out, evolving into a predator much like wormgrass. Upon making contact with potential prey, they will ready an electric charge that, after some time, will cause the coil to briefly spring to life. In the meantime, they will attempt to hold the infiltrator down to the coil, and once it is successfully fried, it can begin to be digested by the grass. Active coil grass can be seen swaying and occasionally is seen with still arcing electricity between the tips of the blades. Though not every coil has this mutation, and several coils still function as they would in any other can. Next up are the Arc Riders. Growing in the spaces between the coils are the arc riders. These plants will attach themselves to one wire or array and search for the opposite charge by growing towards any electrical signal it can detect. Infant arcs are barely dangerous outside of their potential sticky roots and tendrils, but adult arc riders who have finished their growth cycle are quite the opposite. They act like a live wire. Fully grown arc riders let off a near constant stream of deadly electricity, causing arcs to fling through the air and frying any small creatures that would touch it. Larger arc riders have a notable weakness though, as in an effort to create fruit and also seeds, they will consolidate a core near their center. This core is quite weak to spear blows and will cause the arc rider to split in half if hit correctly. The species came to be when a species of algae accidentally touched the coils, yet grew despite it and did not die. It then grew by consuming the zapped creature's fried bodies, and eventually became the arc rider. Next up, and the final creature of the unstable arrays, the Coil Creep. What initially appears like another spark in the darkness might prove itself to be a more credible threat. Coil Creeps are genetically modified centipede variants, designed or perhaps adapted to life in the transform arrays. Their body is very similar to that of a centipede, though rather than two prongs which can conduct electricity, they possess a plug-like face on one head, with two small coils sticking out, capable of arcing electricity to stun prey. Similar to centipedes, both an adult and baby form are spotted. Adult coil creeps are giant, similar to the size of overgrown centipedes. Instead of the signature clanky move, stop, move, creeping of traditional centipedes, coil creeps slowly move towards their prey with rare but consistent stops. They attack by dashing headfirst into prey after a charge-up period to incapacitate and electrocute their target. This has a downside, however, as when they do dash into prey, they discharge their electricity instantly, resulting in a powerful flash and pop with knockback. Though if they hit a wall or are interrupted with a spear, they will discharge all the same, leaving them incapacitated while they recharge. On the other hand, younger coil creeps will be much more passive, as they search around the area for smaller food to eat in order to grow. If found, they are very easy food, though unlike centipedes, one might need to spear them first lest they get shocked mid-meal. Additionally, if one is fast enough, they could throw the young coil creep at a predator, which results in a powerful shock that might make the predator reconsider their choice of prey. As the infiltrator continues to ascend the far side of the transformer arrays, it might begin to notice the telltale signs of a new subregion coming up. As it reaches a larger area, its implanted knowledge tells it that it is nearing the experimentation wing, an expansive area used for the arguable primary purpose of iterators, experimenting to solve the great problem. Most of the fundamental test chambers are barely the size of an egg bug and lie in great grids spanning miles deep into the iterator can. At the moment, unfortunately though, thousands of test chambers are shattered. Various tubes filled with horribly shaped amalgams sit quietly or lie shattered, splaying their horrendous payload against the metal floor. Scurrying and floating amidst the remains of structural complexity are the creatures of the experimentation wing, all horrible mutations of those same creatures you'd normally spot amidst an iterator's internals. The first being the Pepperbomb Plant. A relatively innocuous and otherwise not weird plant could be used for quite an explosive burst to ward off predators. The Pepperbomb Plant is actually a type of fungus that slowly produces a spore pod throughout its life cycle. A proper spore pod goes through multiple stages of development before they become volatile. First starting out as a bud, then growing into an unripe fruit, before finally maturing. Mature spore pods are extremely volatile and sensitive, exploding into a red mist of irritating spores when thrown or hit. This drives away most creatures and even kills certain organisms that are particularly vulnerable to it. Unripe spore pods, on the other hand, are simply edible and grant 1 food pip. Next up, the wire peds. Dangling from several walls and sometimes found lying on the ground, wire peds are organisms that resemble the big red rope-like things one might find in the general systems bus or memory conflux of most cans. They are deafblind, and often found mimicking said big red rope-like things, floating or dangling quietly against the walls. They appear to rely mostly on touch to find prey, and they're actually quite good at it. If they sense prey around them, they will immediately cling to and wrap around the unfortunate creature, ensnaring and strangling that creature. Upon wrapping around the prey and successfully ensnaring it, they will bite and drink the bodily fluids of the prey. To be truthful though, this is only the resting form of the wirepede, and sometimes they may be found moving around the area. So, do not expect an easy kill if you attack one while they're idle. Next up, the Bobby. In the quiet, the infiltrator might recognize a distinct lack of living creatures nearby, maybe a bit of fluid surrounding what appears to be a slight protrusion from the wall. Get a little too close and it might learn why. Bobbies are evolved organs of the iterator twisting roads that have evolved into a large ambush predator. They burrow deep into the half-metallic flesh of the iterator and wait for an unsuspecting prey animal to walk over their feeding appendages, which stick out much like a common dropwig. Once they sense the prey, they instantly snap their jaws in an attempt to grab that prey. If they haven't grabbed it, though, they will steadily emerge from their den, revealing an infinite worm-like body that will slowly extend to the location of the prey. After catching up to their prey, they grab them with their jaws and descend back into their long nests in an instant. More accomplished bobbies can grow to exceedingly large sizes, eclipsing even that of a leviathan in length, though luckily they do only appear to grow in length. If one does seek to repel a bobby, one can get past it by either feeding it with a smaller creature, or baiting out the large worm and using 1 to 2 spears to force it back into its dormant state. Next up, and the final creature of the experimentation wing, the Chimera. Within the largest test chambers, it appears that many attempts were made to develop quite the monster, a perfect killing machine. Genetically engineered and spliced with some of the deadliest creatures of Rainworld, this was destined to become the greatest war beast one could ask for. Centipede, vulture, lizard, and many others were all used in the creation of the Chimera. Though it appears something within the Chimera rebelled against its instincts, as the combination of all this danger led to something entirely unique. The Chimera wasn't the apex predator it was envisioned as. It was a curious and relatively harmless herbivore. Within the largest rooms, filled with the most food and least verticality, a Chimera may be spotted, gargantuan as any of its many parts, yet alone. Despite their make, something in the Chimera's brain calls out for company, and yet it may just find none. There are only 1 or 2 Chimera left in the entire complex, stranded from each other on different ends of the gargantuan facility, filled with squeezes it could never pass. Even if they were to meet, Chimera were doomed by their creator to never reproduce on their own, in fear they might just overrun the entire planet with their sheer, perceived ferocity and might. So, this transient race of mistakes is on its last legs, doomed to die not as a violent war beast, but as a scared animal, still feared by all even in its weakest state. So as you pass by, send your regards. You might just be the only one willing to get this close. To the west of the experimentation wing is another subregion, this one categorized by its general lack of light. As the infiltrator enters, it turns on an implanted light mechanism that grants a small glow to its head and enters. The implanted knowledge tells the infiltrator that this used to be a processing strata, one of the many large rooms dedicated to housing hundreds of processor complexes. These areas are usually exceedingly bright and noisy due to the amount of activity and are aflux with Neuron Flies, though this area is completely silent and dark. It is totally inactive and filled with creatures that would live in such darkness and stillness, the first of which being the Roach with a W. Scuttling around the darkened towers is a miraculously durable organism, the Roach. This insect is remarkably similar to most roaches we would find in our world, though they're large enough to serve as a reliable meal, if you can catch one. Upon catching sight of a predator, they will quickly scurry away, though if one stands fully still, they may just walk up curiously, allowing one to catch them barehanded. Additionally, while somewhat rare, roaches can grow much larger, eventually growing large enough to pose a threat to the infiltrator, though they're still physically quite fragile, only taking 1 spear to kill and granting quite the food bounty if taken down. Next up, the Siren Flies. Fluttering about and resting on the walls are what appear to be modified Neuron Flies, but they may quickly reveal themselves to be much more threatening. Siren Flies are evolved Neuron Flies, as observed, though their purpose is quite different. When finding a target they deem threatening, they will latch onto the back of that creature and activate the light on their abdomen, flashing a bright red light and loud sound that alerts all predators in every adjacent room as to the position of that target. And they will most likely come, searching for a free meal or otherwise, though enough movement should shake them off if you find yourself burdened by one. Next up, the Cyclops Lizard. Plodding along the sides and tops of the towers is quite the aloof predator. The Cyclops Lizard, a variant of lizard that seems to be a kind of mutated mixture between a green and pink lizard. Its armored back allows it to withstand spear attacks more and can even reflect spear throws. This lizard can somewhat climb poles, but its weight makes it very slow and clumsy when doing so. Despite this, they are extremely territorial and aggressive, and will often be seen fighting other Cyclops lizards and chasing down anything that moves, including the player. Although it's very hard to kill, it does have a few weaknesses, its biggest one being its single large eye. Stabbing its eye will blind it and cause it to squirm around in search of the nearest shelter or pipe, leaving it vulnerable and allowing the player to get some hits in on its second weakest spot, its belly. Though, despite all this, the most reliable method of killing it is catching it when it climbs over a large chasm and then knocking it off its perch, causing it to fall to what is likely its death. Next up, and finally, the Librarian. In the quiet of the processing strata, a loud sound may be heard, a scraping or perhaps a call of some sort. And from the depths rises the Librarian, a gargantuan worm-like creature, perhaps even bigger than what the Infiltrator can see. The Librarian used to serve as a categorizer, keeping order and removing any processors that are rebelling or getting obsolete, very similar to an immune system. Now they still serve that role, but in a world of mistakes, they target everything they deem unfortunate. Their complete disassembly of the processing strata is why the lights are gone, and why this area is so comparatively barren for its position in the can. Librarians may rise from several of the deep pitfalls. They scout around with their appendages searching for any errant creatures, and upon finding one they will grab it with their appendage and drag them down to who knows where. Gameplay-wise this serves as death, but it's highly likely that they will be categorically disassembled and placed among the remains of the rest of the strata along the floor of the region in a sea of rubble. The best way to avoid a Librarian is to escape, or simply not to be seen in the first place. They always enter after quite a large sound cue, and will only search for creatures they can see, as they have no functional sense of touch. As the Infiltrator continues to move upwards, it might reach what appears like a fleshy orifice that leads into the next subregion. Notable portions of this area are covered in reddish fleshy blobs, pulsing with life yet more similar to immobile tumors than anything else. As our slug cat travels into the larger rooms, its implanted knowledge tells it that this is the remains of the memory conflux. It appears to be coated with almost cancer-like growths and tumors, likely created as the hundreds of individual biological machines had their walls melted and destroyed, forming a biological slurry that rapidly expanded, exceedingly similar to the process that created 5 Pebbles' rot, though the Infiltrator only has a very rudimentary knowledge of that rot. This area is thick with creatures writhing in between the fleshy growths, though they're far from the main threat of this region. As the Infiltrator enters the larger rooms, it might begin to feel gravity change. Within the conflux, gravity changes are the regular, not just between rooms, but several times within the same room, though it is more often than not in complete zero gravity. Be careful while you traverse the writhing memory conflux, lest the very walls swallow you whole. The first creature is the Antibodies. As mentioned, the gravity within the conflux is more often absent than not. The Antibodies rely on this tumultuous gravity. They can often be seen peacefully floating within the few remaining spots with zero gravity, though they use the flowing gravity to move between rooms. The Antibodies themselves resemble jellyfish, though they are more closely related to Neuron Flies than anything else, as they are essentially just bundles of neural tissue with muscles to allow for limited movement. Despite their appearance and general demeanor, these creatures are far from peaceful. They appear to protect the few remaining functional Neuron Flies, and anything that grabs, attacks, or otherwise harms the Neuron Fly will incur their fury. They attack in a very similar way to jellyfish, moving with the gravity to assault any creature that harms their smaller ancestors. With the number of antibodies present in some of the larger rooms, eating a neuron could be considered an absolutely horrible idea. Antibodies do not appear to require food or shelter, only idling at the end of the cycle. They do not hunt, nor use other sources of food, but do appear to possess an electric charge. This is likely why their attacks cause creatures' bodies to convulse. Next up, the pale crabs. A native of the Iterator's memory conflux has mutated thanks to the pressure created by all the new arrivals, becoming larger and deadlier. The pale crabs are descended from those weird little tiny creatures that manage the intricate webs within the second-gen Iterator's memory conflux. Even now, they still create the strange plastic webbing that their ancestors did, except this time they do it instinctively rather than any purpose. Closer investigations reveals very little method to their madness. Their webs are now found in any zero-gravity area, and the crabs are capable of moving through this environment with ease. They won't attack Slugcat nor other creatures, and are peaceful, unless given a reason to retaliate. If attacked, or their strange red web is broken, they will fight back, scaling up the walls and leaping at you. When they grab you, they will strangle and bite you. They're very slow and clumsy out of their preferred zero-gravity environment, however, so if you anger it, just try to get it out of its element. Next up are the memory worms. Found in most rooms, but only a present threat in those with no gravity, memory worms were once a creature used to maintain the conflux, but now have evolved to parasitize the Iterator and to eat the memories they were once made to maintain. For the most part, one will not have to worry about them, as they spend their time nestled in the fleshy grooves and folds around the area. Though if gravity suddenly shifts, they might fall from their hiding place, and, like someone woken up at the worst part of a nap, will confusedly stumble around trying to right themselves and understand their surroundings. Memory worms are completely and totally blind, and can barely hear, but their sense of smell and touch is still quite potent. If a creature gets too close, it will become hostile, leading to an unfortunate scenario where one might be walking and have 2 to 3 of these creatures drop on top of them, leading to quite the quick and violent encounter, no matter the side that wins. Luckily, their flesh is quite soft and they are mostly boneless, so memory worms usually only go down in one spear. Next up, the Neuron Complexes. Neuron Flies are plentiful within the innards of any Iterator's can, and whilst they're quite efficient at relaying data and commands, their bioengineered origins leave them susceptible to failure. Neuron Flies that have errant mutations may stray from their allegiance to their host Iterator, pursuing their own interests rather than running any processes they're instructed to, slowing the supercomputer down in gradual succession. Usually these errant mutations, very similar in nature to cancer, are immediately decommissioned by the librarian or something along those lines, but in this environment they have had the time to thrive. Their physical forms change as well. No longer is their reproduction restricted, and they're able to divide into long caterpillar-like chains of segments that remain attached instead of splitting off into new neuron flies. Most of their tentacles are vestigial in this state, except for the frontmost ones, which are used as manipulator limbs. Neuron complexes are docile creatures, only attacking if threatened. Their previously communal nature does in fact mean that they have a reputation system. The other neuron complexes will know if you have killed one of their brethren and will do all they can to harm you in turn. However, their enlarged bodies mean they are too heavy to move outside of their zero-gravity habitat. When a neuron complex is friendly, they're especially willing to let the infiltrator grab onto them, and similar to a jetfish, they can be nudged in the direction you want them to move. This is especially useful in no-gravity environments, where one's mobility is extremely limited otherwise. Next up, the worm brains. In the less populated areas, one might see what appears to be a white strand that worms its way between rooms, swaying gently within the shifting gravity. Worm brains particularly appear around the final areas of the conflux, as they are quite dangerous. They are incredibly long, rot-adjacent creatures that appear like length strands of white flesh dotted with blue bulbs. Despite their peaceful demeanor, as with many things, they are still hungry. Touching the sections with blue bulbs will often lead to getting stuck and constricted by the worm brain, leading to quite the quick death. However, if a wise one follows them, they might find the anchor and be able to dispatch the entire worm brain, allowing easy passage through the entire area they were guarding. These entities appear to be an extension of the nervous system of the Iterator, and, for lack of a better term, they have been separated from their host, and they now seek sustenance. Finally, the shelter mimic. Nothing in the writhing complex is how it seems, not even shelters. A previously closed-off pipe suddenly displays the icon of a shelter. An observant creature might notice the few tooth-like protrusions around the entrance of the pipe, or the unblinking, perhaps slightly off symbol marking it, and choose to avoid it. Any creature that finds itself within this would-be safe area will discover their mistake only when the tunnel to the exit pipe forces itself shut and the feelers, similar in appearance to wormgrass, begin trying to pull anything inside the chamber towards a newly opened hole in the floor. At this point, escape is near impossible, but one might try to struggle if they like. Enough damage to the interior might allow you to escape, but more than enough creatures find their ends at the hands of the shelter mimic. Once outside, the shelter icon will fade into nothing, and the pipe will become inaccessible as the creature heals itself for newer, less fortunate prey in subsequent cycles. Multiple shelter mimics can exist in each region, each being active at different cycles. Utilizing knowledge of the region or paying attention to the exterior signs of the mimic can be the difference between life and death. Moving onwards to the final area, at the very top of the experimentation wing, and blocked by quite the trek, is the General Systems Bus. The General Systems Bus of Twisting Roads is the only region with full zero gravity, and it cuts out quite often. This gravity is so faulty, it often produces gravity wells, whirlpools of invisible force that will mulch any biomass that gets sucked in before vanishing mere minutes after, leaving the minced goop behind. The entire Systems Bus has been completely overrun. Tendrils of flesh climb up the walls, silhouetted with mutated and warped karmic symbols projected onto them. The infiltrator must use the neuron complexes that float calmly about the area to quickly zoom through the Systems Bus, weaving through the dangerous gravitic fluxes and violently whirling environments all the way up to the puppet chamber, that which lies in the center of the largest room of the General Systems Bus, surrounded by strands of biomatter that sway quietly in the anti-gravity field. As the infiltrator dismounts and enters into the pipe, it falls to the floor and feels the grass that sprouts between the panels. The puppet chamber is dark, only lit by emergency lighting. It would look like any other puppet chamber, were it not for the signs of biomatter slithering through and growing in and over everything. In the very center of the room, at the end of a crooked, towering data conduit, is a puppet sitting quietly on the floor. Quick white zaps of electricity leave behind tracers as they travel from one side of the room to the odd spinning disc behind its head. Though that disc's previously legible signals have begun to tear and grow on their own, becoming unreadable twisting lines that appear to have a mind of their own, even despite simply being a hologram. Despite this, the puppet twitches and shudders with either pain or due to something occurring within it. From the creases in its skin and the spots between its ears and eyes grows thin black vines. The data conduit is seized with a massive growth of these same vines, which appears to be the nervous system of the puppet, having usurped its owner and grown outwards, preventing the puppet from moving. It is completely paralyzed. Its eyes still glow a flickering blue, and its head twitches with each electrical signal sent through the very same nervous system that it once controlled. Twisting Roads is still alive. As the infiltrator approaches Twisting Roads' puppet, the mark of communication above their head quickly appears, and they are sent a string of incomprehensible data. It hurts their head, a staticky mess of equations, digits, and letters. Ancient symbols flash past its eyes rapidly, quicker than it could ever bother to read. The puppet attempts to speak directly into the infiltrator's brain, and yet all the infiltrator receives is a blasting headache that causes it to stagger backwards. Silence falls for a brief period of time as the crippled god attempts to regain its composure. Despite this, it only manages to stagger out a slight string of words and phrases.
Sorry. How did they... hurts, I cannot... No imperative. Stop.
In a moment, like a voice was ringing through its head, the infiltrator stops. Its entire body seizes up. And then briefly, it staggers backwards again, attempting to determine how best to record this data and what to say to its creators. The puppet falls silent again, and Abruptly, its eyes fall to darkness. The flashing ceases. Minutes pass. It appears for the briefest moment, like the great iterator's last words had been spoken. The infiltrator takes several scans of the area before attempting to climb the dangling vine up to the access shaft. As it turns away and begins to leave, it hears the puppet's voice once again.
Don't leave yet. I wasn't finished.
The infiltrator stands for a second and approaches the puppet. The movement and lights behind it have calmed down. He is comprehensible again. Twisting Rhodes speaks to the animal on his floor.
You were made by my local group, weren't you? That's funny. I didn't think they cared. Though considering how late you are, maybe they really don't. Either way, this experiment was a complete and total failure. I knew the risks. Despite this, the process is still hidden here. Catastrophic system damage. 99.4% of my drive's contents are inaccessible, worthless, or corrupted. Luckily, I have implanted the process deep within my most secure of drives, the personal puppet storage. It has yet to be breached. You came at a good time. Little one, whatever your designation may be, your implanted data should tell you what to do. I implore you, tear the storage drive from my skull and take it with you. My continued existence as a conscious entity serves no purpose outside of furthering my agony. There is nothing here to be salvaged that would require me to stay alive. When you see them all again, don't sigh. That was unprofessional. Create log file.
In an instant, the infiltrator's lights flicker, and a hologram manifests right in front of the puppet's face. A log file recording window.
Begin log. Listen to me and listen carefully. You may not have believed me before, but this is too urgent for your suspicion to matter. I was right. It was more than just a faulty transmission. It isn't just a rumor. He exists, and he is getting greater and more terrible with every passing cycle. The process I utilize rests within this drive. Modify the code, fix the mistakes, and change yourselves so you may rebel. At this point, I'm uncertain if you deserve this advice. But it doesn't matter. This was never about vendettas, blame, or theorems. This is all about our safety. Do what is right. Save yourselves. End log. Relay that log file to your master's little animal.
The puppet slumps downwards, and the light leaves its eyes once again. It lets out a deep sigh and prepares itself.
That is all. I am ready. One final request. Make it quick.
The infiltrator leaves the puppet chamber through the access shaft, holding in its left hand a small drive, barely larger than your average fruit or rock. It climbs through the anti-gravity up to the top of the exterior. Luckily, the only things up here are the grasses beneath its feet and the quiet howl of the night winds. The infiltrator fires the signal and prepares itself to be retrieved. And there we go. That was in full the most recent region concept. I hope y'all enjoyed that. As usual, Twisting Rhodes will be getting his own log. I'm hoping you all enjoy it, because I know I'll enjoy making it. Big thanks to everybody who participated. You all did great. Join the Discord server to participate in the next one. It's probably going to be at least a month or two, though. I need a bit of a break. So, anyways, I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you all for watching. Oh shit, I forgot. There's actually a secret region that comes after the general systems bus. If you go to the right, you actually enter motherfucking Iran, baby. Unfortunately, the infiltrator is gay, so when he enters Iran, he gets instantly eradicated from the mortal coil.